everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Saturday, November 26th, 2022. I'm your host, George Kerth, and we do have two hosts suffering from a little bit of a food coma from Thanksgiving. Tyler Snyder, Cody Roadcap won't be with us. But if you remember a few weeks back, we introduced you to Kempy, a member of our League of Record. Kempy is back with us here again, sports betting expert. How you doing here after Thanksgiving? And happy late Thanksgiving to you, because then I could say it on the show.
Hey, George, thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving. Snyder and Cody at the current moment went doubtful. Luckily, you picked me off the waiver wire at the last second. I was just out golfing this afternoon, and you're like, hey, you want to come on the show? Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you back, and you are going to be back with us, I'm sure, throughout the next few weeks, months, however it might be, because it's good having you on here. But we are going to have to talk some NFL news and notes and break down the rest of Week 12. We hope you all had a great start to the week with 3 games on Thanksgiving. I know I had a great start against Tyler, which might be part of the reason why he's not on the show. Kempy, I don't know how you started, but we could talk about that as we go through. Make sure you find us on the couchgms.com and our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at the Couch GMs. You make sure you also check out our start sit column on the couchgms.com. That's where you can see some of Cody's thoughts on starts and sits for the week. And make sure you join our Discord chat. Link is in the description of the video or podcast you're watching. You can talk to us 24/7 about any fantasy news, questions, etc. All right, why don't we jump right in here to NFL news? I'll start off NFL news actually with a little bit of a Thanksgiving recap. Now, we did not really have too much fantasy relevant news, but it is worth noting that Bills pass rusher Von Miller went down with a knee injury. It is hopefully not a season-ending injury. He did tear his meniscus, though. He's going to be reevaluated in 7 to 10 days. The team is hoping to have him back for the playoffs, but his regular season is most likely over. So not really fantasy relevant, but Kempy, I know if you watch some Bills games, he's been a difference maker that they did not have on their roster last year. So this could be pretty significant for them down the stretch.
No, absolutely. And especially even if you have fantasy, if you have the Bills on your fantasy defense at this current moment, that's something that could be drastic. He had a huge play on every single snap that he was in, and that even includes the secondary. I mean, now the quarterbacks have technically more time. Maybe we'll make more precise passes. So it is a huge impact both for the Bills and potentially Bills fantasy holders.
100%. So that's something we'll keep an eye on how they readjust to that over the coming weeks, and we'll keep you updated if we hear any news on an exact timetable for Von Miller's injury. Moving on to some other fantasy news, someone we've been teasing for weeks now. I know someone that I've had on and off my roster. Kempy's had on and off his rosters in different leagues. Odell Beckham is finally starting to schedule meetings with teams. I think he is starting to get close enough to healthy that he can actually sign with somebody and play in a few weeks. Teams in the mix include the Dallas Cowboys, who he's been very vocal talking about on Twitter, if you do follow him on Twitter. If you don't, good follow, go check it out. Other teams in there, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, and his old team, the New York Giants. Now, I think the Giants took a bit of a hit in the Odell Beckham sweepstakes after they lost to the Cowboys. Like, it almost seemed like that game narrative could have been the Odell Beckham game. The winner gets Odell. But there are still 3 other top contenders that are in need of wide receiver help. At least 2 of them, I think, are in need of wide receiver help that are out there looking. So what are your thoughts on who is your favorite? And I don't know if you have betting lines around. If you don't, it's fine. Who's your favorite to go get Odell Beckham?
If I had to pick at this current moment, I honestly think, who do I think he's going to go to? I think he's going to go to the Cowboys. I think that that is the narrative all in itself about him going to Jerry Jones. And yes, they beat the Giants this week, so that could be a huge pickup there. Who would I like to see him go to? I would love to see him go to Kansas City. I feel like that would be such a great fit for fantasy purposes. I know that like Tooney just joined them a couple weeks ago. He's taken that step up. Juju, it took him a little bit to figure out, but he's taking that step up where now that he's hopefully healthy this week, he might be back in that wide receiver 2 contention. If I had to pick who I don't want to see him go to, I don't want to see him go to the Giants. I feel like that one is pretty, I don't know. We've seen it before. I know he's got Danny Dimes behind there now, Vanilla Vic, but that could also be a reason. I think he'll be running a little bit more. And if you want to talk about quarterbacks who are going to run, I don't want to see him go to Baltimore either, just because I would rather see him go to a pass-heavy team as a fantasy owner. How about you, George?
Now, you say you don't want to see him go to Baltimore. The only reason I want to see him go to Baltimore is because I think he's a plug and play wide receiver one on that team, and he might not be on other teams. Like Juju still being there in Kansas City, they'd probably be the next one to be like he'd have the best chance of being a wide receiver one. And still, you might say Juju is probably going to outperform him because he's been in the building longer, knows the playbook more. But I kind of like the idea of Baltimore because he could jump in, be wide receiver one. You could say the same thing about the Giants, but the Giants are starting to sputter, and it seems like it's not necessarily his favorite place to go. And then Cowboys and Buffalo, he'd be a wide receiver too, behind either CD Lamb or behind Stephon Diggs. Um, I will say I did pull up some odds while you were talking just because I was curious. The favorite is the Cowboys, not shocking, at plus 200. Bills plus 350. Giants are actually plus 450. Buccaneers are on the top list plus 700, which I don't understand that one at all.
Yeah,
Um,
that one it's hard to wrap my mind around a little bit. I don't know where he would rank wide receiver wise on that team if that's the point.
well,
Maybe
I mean, where
wide
do you
receiver.
consider Julio Jones at even? Is he wide
Yeah,
receiver four? Is he wide receiver two? Like, I don't even, they don't even understand where people are right now. So, like, add in
ex-
Odell Beckham in that, and they're literally just trying to stack up and give Tom Brady as many weapons as they could to make sure that they mask the fact that Tom Brady is 45 years old and showing signs.
yes, absolutely. They want to keep Tom Brady happy at all costs down there in Tampa Bay.
And then number five is actually the Chargers at plus 800, which I don't entirely hate that move either, especially because their top guys have been injured. But even yet, he could end up sliding in there as a wide receiver three if their
Hmm.
guys get back healthy. Um, but no, it seems like the most legitimate talks as of recently have also included the Chiefs and the Ravens in there. So we'll see how those odds adjust, and if we hear any more about the Odell Beckham sweepstakes, we'll let you know. It's getting to the point where it may not affect fantasy season, but for the NFL playoffs, we're gonna have to watch out for it and see how it affects it. Um,
Absolutely.
I think that wraps up NFL news. Not a ton to talk about that we didn't hit already on our Tuesday show, but we do have a bunch of games to talk about in our Week 12 preview. Now, it is a little weird in the middle of bye week season to mention that we do not have any teams on bye this week, partly because of the Thanksgiving games on the schedule. They did kind of erase this week in byes. But bye week season is not over, as Cody mentioned on our Tuesday show. There's still 6 teams on bye in week 14. And I think there's 2, or I forget if it's 2 or 4 next week. So there's still a little bit to go. Don't completely think your roster's out of the water yet. But we do have to start with the 1 o'clock games and an exciting matchup of the Denver Broncos traveling east to the Carolina Panthers. Starting on the Panther side of the ball, the only significant injury is Terrace Marshall is questionable to play, but I think that doesn't matter too much to me going in a matchup against Denver. Um, I'm going to say I don't like wide receivers on that team in general, also including DJ Moore in that mix. Where are you at against a tough Denver defense?
At this point, it's hard to trust any wide receivers or running backs fantasy tools without necessarily knowing who is the guy, getting the ball, who's the quarterback at this point. So I'm not trusting anybody on the Carolina offense right now. If you need to, obviously you can play Foreman, maybe DJ Moore if it's a must, but I'm staying away from the Panthers right now, especially against a Broncos defense, which is um, it's very hard to score against as is.
I'm with you there, and I think I heard like Sam Darnold was getting activated. I'm not sure if it's Baker or him even. I don't even know if there's an official word. I've been trying to search around for so much information on the Panthers quarterback situation, and it's been a blur. I just know it's not PJ Walker. He's doubtful for the game, so it's not going to be him, which is the reason I like DJ more. Um, Dante Foreman though. Like I know you said you don't really want to trust the running backs, but I know Foreman's been a guy that's been kind of a savior for some people over these last few weeks. Do you even not like so not trusting him either?
I would if I needed to. Obviously, it's
Mhm.
tough to say if you have Foreman at this point and there's nobody else you can start him over confidently. Then I would slide him in the lineup. I feel like the floor will be there. It's not going to be amazing. It has the potential to have a booming game, but in this exact matchup against the Broncos, I think I'm finding any way I can to avoid putting him in my lineup.
Yeah, I'm with you there. He's been tough in some tough matchups, but you never know if he's going to have the boom because the volume is there. The floor should be there because of the volume. Moving over to the Broncos side of the ball. This is a much more bright looking matchup for fantasy when you're looking at the Broncos facing the Carolina defense. KJ Hamler, Jerry Judy, both out for the week with their injuries. Cortland Sutton, in my opinion, might be one of the biggest boom plays of the week. But is there anybody else on this Broncos team that you like other than Cortland Sutton?
I love Sutton at this point. George, we talked about the tight end in the beginning. I forget his exact name.
Greg
Um,
Dulcich.
Greg Dulcich. I don't mind him at this point just because I think he is going to be a weapon out there that's healthy. But honestly, if I look at this from a betting perspective, it kind of influences my fantasy perspective.
Okay.
The current under over for this game is 36. So I don't think that we're going to see a lot of points. We're not going to see a lot of touchdowns, or at least we're projecting it. So there's nothing that I really love fantasy wise in this matchup, um, especially on the Panthers side, but the Broncos side as well. I'm not necessarily sure who's going to score those 5 potential touchdowns if there were any.
I'm with you. I'm trying to go back and find what their score was last week. They scored 16 again last week, but they gave up 22. So I remember coming
Hmm.
into last week's game, there was a stat that was like the Broncos would be 8-1 if they had scored 18 points per game. They'd now be what 8-2 or 8-3, something like that. But again, like their ceiling on offense is about 16 points, like about where they scored last week. It doesn't matter if Russell Wilson's looking better, but it's been rough. But I will say
Yeah.
the one thing that's kind of been good, even though it's been fumbling and everything else, running back situation, specifically Latavius Murray, who is now their starter because they released Melvin Gordon. I like him a lot in this matchup, despite the fact that I don't think a lot of points are going to be scored.
Oh, absolutely. And I think he's the guy that's going to be carrying the ball. And if there's not a lot of points being scored on offense, I mean, at least if you give the running back, you're going to chop away the clock, which is another reason why I think they project that score being lower, is that they're going to be running the ball a lot with Murray. So he's definitely somebody that I would like to see being played. Um, and and I think that's a huge. If you could grab him off the waivers this week, I think you might be locking yourself up for a great potential RB1 going into the fantasy playoffs in a few weeks.
100% with you there. I like that a lot. And you did have on here, I don't know if you mentioned the spread at all. I know you mentioned the over under.
Yeah, the under
Broncos are
over.
only -1.
Yeah, exactly. I always look for lines every single week on lines that just make you curious. Like, what is going on with that line? So the fact that I saw Broncos -1 when they have a very strong defense against a Panthers team that has nothing at all. I like the Broncos offense more than I like the Panthers. Like this line just doesn't make sense, right, George?
No, it
So
really
clearly
doesn't.
you think the Broncos are going to be better,
Yeah,
which takes it in its turn. I might bet the Panthers +1.5 here, just because there's something wrong with this line. They know something we don't. I might go with the Panthers because there's no reason that this line should be this close.
I'm with you there. That's something that I think you taught me since our last show, and I want to see if there's anyone else out there that's been taking some of those random tip advice, bets that Kempy mentioned the last time he was on. Let us know in the comments. But I've been performing a lot better in my work picks against the spread league ever since that Kempy came on here. I finished second now 2 weeks in a row, swept Thanksgiving. Like it's interesting how you can read Vegas just by looking at spreads and having a basic knowledge of where these teams are and their records.
And
So
it's amazing that you have to combine in order to be like great at everything. You have to combine knowing sports or sports in general, like just knowing the game. You have to be able to know fantasy, and then you have to be able to know lines. That's something that I still haven't conquered. I don't think I'll ever conquer, but I'm just trying to like combine all three in order to make like the greatest fantasy betting, storm that I could. I haven't
and
done it. I'm hoping to hit it soon.
No, and I also think it's interesting. I don't know if you or if anyone out there has any leagues on Sleeper. Sleeper has started to integrate betting lines and individual player like over under yardage totals and stuff onto their actual app. I think for the same reason, like you can kind of have an idea maybe this player is going to bust or go off, depending on if this line looks really weird. Like, why is Dante Foreman only is over under on yards only 35 yards? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that's what it is. I didn't actually look at the line, but if that was that low,
Hmm.
you'd be like, maybe they're expecting Foreman to really bust.
Hmm.
All right,
I completely agree.
we
Sorry.
get we can get out of betting now for a second. We got to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling to the Cleveland Browns. Um, this is the game where I wanted to, at least for the first time today. I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. Um, Part of it, Leonard Fournette is doubtful for this game. He's probably not going to play. But before we knew that Fournette was doubtful, Bucks offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich said that Rachaad White is, quote, ready for a bigger role. We saw that before their bye week. He started over Leonard Fournette. He had 50-50 split on him in carries. If he goes out there and has a good game against the Browns, which is very possible, he could take over this role, and Leonard Fournette might be a question mark for your team heading into the fantasy playoffs. So if you haven't already checked your waiver wire, go check your waiver wire, see if Rachaad White's still sitting out there.
As a Leonard Fournette owner, I am so angry with myself. The fact that I didn't pick up Rachaad White when he was dropped, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it is killing me right now. I was hoping all week that this wouldn't be true, that this is just a false narrative created by us fantasy fans that want to see the world burn almost. That want to see just create some sort of drama so we can talk, oh, maybe Rachaad White's taking those snaps. Maybe Rachaad White's the next guy down in Tampa Bay. I was praying that it wouldn't be like this. And I kept arguing. I was like, nope, they never said anything. We're just making this up. I know Rachaad White's good, but I think it's just a coincidence. But seeing Byron Leftwich say that he's ready for bigger role makes me nervous as a playoff Lenny hopeful.
I really wish that not only you were here, but because I know I've been talking to you about Leonard Fournette about in our league of record, but also Cody and Tyler, who completely just rolled over the fact that I mentioned Rachaad White in our waiver wire column on the episode I missed 2 weeks ago. And now we're looking at their next game played. He could be a starter, and he's looking like a big role for the future. This is the one time where I'm going to humble brag and say, yep, I called this one right after that game happened.
But well deserved.
Anyway, Tampa Bay Buccaneers otherwise, there's still no Russell Gage, and their wide receivers are healthy otherwise. I think you have to play Mike Evans, you have to play Chris Godwin. You might be able to throw out a Julio Jones if you're desperate, but he's touchdown dependent. I guess that's about all, unless you like Tom Brady. Do you like Tom Brady?
It depends on the day. It's not somebody I'm rushing out to start. I think there's better options, but he's definitely going to be in more supported in the passing offense. Unless here's Rachaad White mixing things up, because even when Leonard Fournette starts, you can confidently know that he's going to be throwing to Lenny, and Lenny's going to get those passing yards or receiving yards that were passing yards for Tom Brady. But without him, it's going to be a different offense, I think.
And we'll have to see how exactly that shakes out. Moving to the Cleveland Browns side of the ball, speaking of a different offense, this will be the last week of their offense we were used to all year. It's the last week of Jacoby Brissett. Next week against his former team is the return of Deshaun Watson. But as of now, it's a decently tough matchup against Tampa Bay. There's still some Browns you have to play. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. That actually rhymed. How about that?
That was pretty good. Poet, you
Nick
didn't know
Chubb.
it.
Yeah, Poet, I didn't know it. How about it? Nick Chubb still has to be in your lineup. And I think Amari Cooper also could be a go. Donovan Peoples-Jones was somebody who was a decent ad this week. And I was kind of steering people towards it's an ad for the future. You like to see that upside before Deshaun Watson comes back. Are you like me and don't like him this week against Tampa?
I say it to like anybody I'm with when I'm watching either Red Zone or NFL games with. I'm like, this could be Donovan Peoples-Jones week, but there's only just usually one a year. So
there's been 3 in a row though.
That's what blows my mind. I said that 3 weeks ago, and it's now it's making me look like I keep saying it every week. It could be his week, just this week, but he's showing that he is, I think, climbing up the fantasy ranks. Not that I'm not starting him right away, but he's somebody that I'm watching, especially with Watson in the future. Like, let's see if they have a connection together, and if this is something we can build up going into next season to watch, to maybe draft him early.
100%. So I think this is hold him on your bench this week. Don't drop him and overreact. We got to see how he does with Deshaun Watson starting next week in a solid matchup next week. But we're not looking at week 13. We're looking at week 12. So we can bring it back to the next 1 o'clock game. Baltimore Ravens traveling to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'll start on the Jaguar side because it could be pretty simple. Ravens defense has been solid, but you got Travis Etienne over there, and I think you also have surprising top 10 wide receiver Christian Kirk. That's where I'm limiting it on Jacksonville's side. Is there anything you want to add about the two? Oh, I think I lost you audio-wise.
I think I'm back. I think we're good.
You're good.
Okay, I heard you. But I think at this point, there's a few matchups like this week where you know who your fantasy studs are at this point on each team. It's week 12, and I think if you are starting, there's not a lot of fringe guys at this point. They're proven that you can trust them or you can't trust them. And I think that's where a lot of people fall in this matchup this week. Obviously, you're going to start your Andrews. You're going to start your Lamar. You're going to start whatever running back is taking that next step and is going to be leading the pack. Jacksonville side, same thing. You're going to start Lawrence if you need to. Obviously, it depends on where you're at in your quarterback leagues. Every quarterback or every league is different with quarterbacks. You're going to start your ETNs, your Kirks, your Ingram if you need to on your tight end dartboard, not tart end dartboard, tight end dartboard. Um, but I think that kind of summarizes that matchup.
Yeah, it's honestly pretty simple. I'll just mention the fact that Baltimore's beat up. You got Gus Edwards, Demarcus Robinson, Devin Duvernay, Isaiah Likely, all questionable. The only one that's really significant is Gus Edwards. Like I was saying to Kempy before the show, I think if Edwards goes, you could play Edwards. If Edwards does not go, you can play Kenyon Drake. And that's pretty much as straight cut as you're going to get.
Agreed.
Cool. And that was pretty quick there. I think that was pretty straightforward, and this one might be the same way. Houston Texans traveling down to the Miami Dolphins. Only significant injury we have to talk about on the Dolphins side is Raheem Mostert is listed as doubtful. Now, I really loved this whole Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson dynamic that was going on. Like, Jeff Wilson's been the boom, but Raheem Mostert has been a solid fantasy play despite the fact that that Wilson's been going off. Like, he's still getting 13 to 15 points a week. It's going to hurt not having him there if you're someone that was leaning on him. Hopefully the fact that there's no buys helps you out to find somebody else to go. But Jeff Wilson might be even bigger this week.
Absolutely. I love Jeff Wilson this week, especially with the Texans' run defense. Running backs have been absolutely destroying them. So Jeff Wilson, now that he's at the team's RB1 and is the only guy that's going to be running for the most part against this Texans defense, he's somebody I'm definitely looking to play in every league I have him.
Agreed. 100%. So you got to go back to play your studs because the Texans actually are good against the pass because teams run on them so much. But you're not benching Jalen Waddle, you're not benching Tyreek Hill, and I think Tua can even be a decent play at your quarterback position if you're desperate for a quarterback. But again, you might not be just because there's no bye weeks. I think that's pretty straightforward on the Miami side of the ball. We can move over to the Texans side where we can spend 2 seconds on it like every week. Dameon Pierce.
Perfect.
Cool. That wraps up that matchup there.
I think we are gonna be talking a lot about start your studs because this week we did not have any buys. So I think for a little bit different from weeks prior when we're surviving by Mageddon and all these buys happening, I think we're able to just say start your studs because obviously you have a whole roster available to you. So I feel bad that we're saying just start if you have them, start your studs. But obviously, if anybody has any specific questions, you can always reach out to George, Snyder, Cody at the Couch GMs and figure out who you need to play at any given Sunday.
100%, because there's some people might be considering studs on my bench in our league of record because I got lucky with a waiver wire pickup or with one of those late round draft picks. But now, like with there needing no buys, I don't have to play them, and there's some guys I like a little better. So definitely go reach out to us and let us know what you got going on in your rosters. I can move us on to the next 1 o'clock game. Chicago Bears traveling up to the New York Jets. And the Bears have been a really big topic of conversation this week. Obviously talking around Justin Fields, who's questionable. He separated his shoulder and his non-throwing arm. So there's a chance he's going to go, but there's also the argument that Cody had on our Tuesday show of, do you think he's not going to run as much? Because it's a pain management thing. That thing obviously hurts. I have been thinking about this a little bit, and I'll see what your opinion is too. Dalvin Cook is the person that comes to mind whenever you think of separated shoulders. Dalvin Cook played last year with 2 of them majority of the season and was still a top 5 running back. I'm basically going to call Justin Fields a running back here just for argument's sake. Like, do you think this is really going to affect him? Do you think they're going to actually limit his rushing I should say called rushing plays just because they can because he's a quarterback? Or do you think they're going to be like, nah, Justin Fields has been good. Just throw him out there like usual.
I think it's tough to tell because I know you want to compare it to Dalvin Cook, and that's honestly who I think of instantly when I hear shoulders. But Dalvin Cook's job is to run the ball. Justin Fields has to take that quarterback game management where he can either run, which is a great tool that he has, but he's also his main purpose is to throw at the end of the day. So while I think he's going to be focusing a lot on throwing, the running might take that step back because it's not something he needs to do. Granted, I guess it depends on the game situation, how the game opens up, and how it's progressing. But I do see that. I think it could take a step back if he really is suffering. And I think he'll just be throwing the ball a little bit more, especially if they go down early against the Jets.
I mean, I'm actually kind of hoping if they go down early that they kind of pull off the leash a little bit and let him run a little more if it helps them get back into the game. So like this is the one weird situation where I feel like them going down can lead to more running the ball. So I
Hmm.
almost want them to go down to the Jets, but I don't know if that's going to happen, honestly. But away from Fields, just now to talk about the rest of that team, I still don't like playing any of the pass catchers minus maybe Cole Kmet if you're desperate for that tight end, like 3/4 of fantasy owners are. Could
Hmm.
not be a bad play, but he's still very up and down. And then David Montgomery would be the only other person I'd be considering on that roster.
Agreed.
And the reason why I say they might not go down to the Jets is because we have some news since our Tuesday show that the Jets officially named Mike White their starting quarterback. I mean, some of you might not know who Mike White is. Some of us know him from that little bit of time he started last season, and then people are like, Mike White's the next starter for the Jets. And then he started to look like that average quarterback, and it was the typical narrative of, oh, they just didn't know how to game plan for him. I don't think this is a great move for the Jets. I was already critical of it Tuesday. What are your thoughts on how the Jets are going to roll on offense with Mike White?
I'm watching this super closely when it comes to Sunday. First of all, the Jets starting Mike White scares me a little bit with the wide receiver options that they did have at the current point. Obviously, I trust Michael Carter still if I need to roll him out there. But overall, with Mike White being the starting quarterback and Fields being injured, maybe questionable, maybe out, and you got to look at Trevor Simeon as a backup, I think you're looking at a dangerous game waiting to happen. This is one of those where I might not start my studs just because I'm not sure who's going to be scoring the ball. We looked at the under over. It's currently standing at 38.5 right now. So it's hard to say if one of those fantasy studs is going to score one of those touchdowns that lead up to those 38 potential points. Uh, I don't know. I think it's going to have an impact. I guess we'll see what Salah thinks is the best option here, but I guess he's thinking Mike White.
Yeah, he's thinking Mike White, and until further notice, I think it's Michael Carter. And we were saying the Jets defense is also a good one. The Jets defense has actually been top 10, if I'm not mistaken, so far this year.
Hmm.
Chicago's offense has not been good outside of an injured Justin Fields running the football. Just to throw it out there, Justin Fields' backup would be Trevor Simeon if he does not go. We really have no more insight on it yet, so make sure you keep an eye on our Twitter and our Facebook for those injury reports on Sunday morning when we actually do get the official reports. One person we do know is out. It's Joe Mixon. As we move on to our next game, the Cincinnati Bengals traveling to the Tennessee Titans. Mixon out, and we got Samaje Perine as our starter. A lot of people loved him out of last week when he went off in the absence of Mixon. You're an owner of Mixon and Perine in our league of record. Give me some insight into your mind thinking about that. Do you play him? Do you don't?
So at this current moment, I am a Mixon owner and I'm a Fournette owner. So I am going through all the fields this week with some doubtful news going into Sunday, maybe some out news already if we're looking at Mixon. Um, at this point, I am going to be starting Pirine just because I need to start some sort of running back. I don't have an option behind Fournette, so I have to start a running back or a wide receiver in my flex, and I have to start a running back. It looks like Pirine's going to be the next guy up in that list. I don't love the matchup, especially because the Titans' run defense is dangerous. They are legit. And I think they had a chance of shutting down Mixon completely. I can't imagine what they're going to be doing to Pirine. Um, but I have to roll him out just because look at how many touchdowns the Bengals running back has scored in the last 2 weeks. I know technically 3 weeks with the two games since they had a bye week last week, but the last 3 weeks the Bengals running backs scored 8 touchdowns. 8 touchdowns. So I'm starting Pirine. I don't love it, but I'm going to be doing it against the Titans on Sunday.
I knew you and I had very similar thoughts on Samaje Perine, but I never thought about the 8 touchdowns deal. You're right, because Mixon went for 5, and then there's 3 combined last week.
Hmm.
It's not sustainable. What
No.
is sustainable is the Bengals' point output if they start involving the wide receivers into that touchdown party they got going on, and someone they might be getting back, Jamar Chase. Don't go out there and just set Jamar Chase and forget it. He is considered a game time decision. But I think if he plays, he's good to go out there. And the only person it affects is Tyler Boyd. I think T. Higgins is good to go. Kempy, I know you had some strong thoughts on this one too. Just go ahead, talk the rest of the Bengals wide receivers while we move before we move on.
Yeah, honestly, with Jamar Chase coming back, I am not afraid to roll out T. Higgins confidently still. I think he's still a great wide receiver play, whether that's your wide receiver one, wide receiver two, even a flex play if you are gifted in that position at the current moment. But with Jamar Chase coming back, I think it might even you could look at it might like it might help T. Higgins moving forward because right now all the attention has been on T. Higgins. Your best defender is going to be guarding T. Higgins. Now it might mix up between Chasers or Higgins, so could spread it out a little bit. I know it definitely will be impacting Tyler Boyd the most. I think he is the best wide receiver three on a team right now. But I think you're not going to be able to roll him out as confidently fantasy wise moving forward because of Higgins or because of Chase coming back.
Exactly. That's exactly where I'm at on that as well. And then we've moved to the Titans side of the ball where they're completely healthy, and it honestly kind of doesn't matter for fantasy. They've been one of the weirder teams when it comes to being solid in record and decent on offense, and there just hasn't been a lot of targets to pinpoint in the fantasy realm. Derrick Henry's their entire offense for the most part. He's still obviously in your lineups, but Traylon Burks could be a decent flex play this week if you're desperate at a wide receiver. Bengals defense, middle of the pack. Titans looked like they really wanted to get Traylon Burks involved, and obviously you saw how many people picked him up off the waiver wire this week. He was one of the top targets, so he's might be someone that's coming around, could be a breakout before we get to the fantasy playoffs.
I completely agree with that. I saw him getting picked off the wire in almost every league that I'm in, and it's a well-earned waiver wire pickup too. I don't think this is something that it's just going to be hopefully a coin flip. I think we might be seeing a legit wide receiver moving forward.
And we really hope so because the Titans haven't had one since they traded away A.J. Brown this offseason. Go Birds. We
Go
can
Birds.
move on to the last 1 o'clock game.
Hold on. Before we do move on to the last 1 o'clock game, though,
Oh,
I did
yeah.
want to mention the current spread right now. The current spread for the Titans against the Bengals is +3.5. And I'm not sure the exact numbers right now, but I'm pretty sure the Bengals record. It's definitely not as good as the Titans.
The Titans are 7-3. I am actually a little behind here. I'm sorry. 7-3 Titans, 6-4 Bengals.
Okay, so the Titans you're telling me have a better record. They're going to be at home this week, and they're getting 3.5 points. And I know I'm typically the person who thinks, okay, this is weird. I maybe might think Bengals because I'm thinking the opposite of whatever I'm thinking. But in this case scenario, I am taking the plus points in this matchup because first of all, they're going to be the only way they're going to lose is if the wide receivers have a great game. If T. Higgins and Jamar Chase come back and have great games. The second thing I'm thinking of is the running game for the Bengals is going to be destroyed. So that is making me think that I'm favoring the Titans. And then the stat came out when Mike Vrabel has 10 days rest. He is currently 9-0 against the spread and straight up against all matches in his coaching career. So the Titans coming off that Thursday game, having those 10 days rest, could be a huge play right here. And I'm taking them straight up against the Bengals on Sunday.
Mike Vrabel is the new Andy Reid, being undefeated out of the bye week, and we can also include mini buys apparently. So that's what the Titans are coming off with the mini buy. I like that little analysis there and an interesting look into that matchup. One more 1 o'clock game here. Atlanta Falcons traveling to the Washington Commanders. I laugh because we were talking about this before the show, and like, who do you go with? I gotta talk about the Falcons running backs a little bit. The Commanders are actually fourth best in the league against the running back, and it's been almost a 50-50 split. I think we said it was like closer to 60-40. Cordarrelle Patterson getting 60, Tyler Algier getting 40. I still can't get that name right because we got it wrong in the offseason, and it's been destroying me.
Just gotta keep rolling with it.
Gotta keep rolling with it. Anyway, so for that reason of the bad matchup and the fact that they're basically splitting almost down the middle, I don't like playing either of them, and that might mean I like playing literally absolutely zero Falcons.
I'm in the same boat. I'm not afraid to admit it. I will just say I'm not starting any Falcons. I started Mariota. That one I know Snyder's going to get mad about.
Yeah,
but
100%.
I started him the last 2 weeks in some leagues as a quarterback. And this week I'm kind of fading off of that. I'm actually going to be starting Aaron Rodgers over him, as I started Mariota over Rodgers the last 2 weeks. But I don't like any Falcons here, especially without Pitts. I know the running backs are great. If you have the running back, you might consider starting them. but it's still a split, like we said. So it's a dangerous move.
I'm going to go out and out both of us, I guess, from what we said before the show, and it might sound harsh, but it's kind of true. If you're a competing team right now that is forced to play any Falcons or outside of maybe like two Commanders, how are you a competing team? Like,
Hmm.
you either have really good stars around that, or you must have just made some bad trades and now you're stuck in a bad situation. Like, this is a situation where it's like, yeah, we can tell you who might be able to get you 10, but for the most part, like, you're going to be grasping at straws when you're trying to play any Falcons or most Commanders. We can say that both running backs on the Washington Commanders side are decent plays this week. Antonio Gibson has been pretty good, and he's getting passing down work, which is good if you're in a half PPR or a PPR. And Brian Robinson is normally pretty good in a game that Washington is up, which they should be at least closer up against Atlanta, unless Atlanta decides to have one of their random offensive outbursts. So I do like both of them, and then there's obviously Terry McLaurin's a decent play. Um, but it's really rough with both of these teams when you look at it in the grand scheme.
Yep, you completely outed us. I'm not starting them. Hopefully, I mean, I'm not saying that there's guys you can't start. Obviously, we talked about Gibson, Robinson. Maybe if you want to put Thomas on the tight end dartboard. I'm going to keep calling it the
Mhm.
tart end dartboard, but the tight end dartboard. Um, we talked about Dotson and uh, McLaurin as well. But outside of that, I'm ready for the next one. I'm ready for 4 o'clock. If that's the game I'm watching at 1 o'clock, I'm ready for 4 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's not the game you're watching at 1 o'clock, but I mean, maybe NFL Red Zone will keep it a little bit of a mix there. I don't know. 4 o'clock window starts off with the Los Angeles Chargers traveling to the Arizona Cardinals, and I'm glad that Kempy took a look at our rundown before the show because I actually accidentally put the Rams injuries in the Chargers slot on our rundown, so that would have been pretty interesting if we got to hear it. I was like, oh, wrong Los Angeles team. The Chargers injury report looks pretty straightforward. Mike Williams is out. Everyone else is good to go. So like you and I both agreed, it seemed like Keenan Allen, that could be a nice little boost. Hopefully he gets a little bit of a bump on snap share after last week coming back from the injury. And Josh Palmer is also still go out there and roll him out.
Absolutely, especially with Williams out, Palmer's the next guy up. I know Carter is in the mix there as well, maybe Carter Palmer, but obviously that boost to Keenan Allen makes me so happy as a fantasy owner of his. Um, and I'm sure many people out there that are hoping to see that Keenan Allen of old, the Keenan Allen that you drafted just a year or so ago, or a couple months ago, or maybe a year ago that you saw early in drafts. It's exciting to see.
I bought low on Keenan Allen in week 3 in a dynasty league where I started 3-0. I was so hot. In the meantime, I lost Michael Thomas. I had weeks where I had to start Randall Cobb at wide receiver, and I was just praying for the time that Keenan Allen got back. And we're finally back here. I'm still hanging in a wild card spot in that dynasty league. My team is almost back up to full health. I had Travis Etienne now as a starting running back. Anyway, we can not talk about my fantasy teams. um, Austin Eckler, obviously, in your lineup, Justin Herbert as well. And you could throw out Gerald Everett if you want a wide receiver out there, I mean, a tight end out there from this team. Chargers are pretty much a full go at this point, minus the Mike Williams situation. Moving on to the Cardinals side, where it's looking a lot better than it has in recent weeks, mostly because Kyler Murray should be back, as well as potentially Hollywood Brown. Can you give us a quick breakdown on how that Cardinals passing game should look, not only with Kyler back, but maybe Hollywood?
I'm looking forward to seeing how that progresses. I know we haven't had Kyler the last 2 weeks. We had good old Colt McCoy, and he was still able to throw. I know the Cardinals had a huge hit with also losing Zach Ertz, but I think having both Hollywood and D Hop in that lineup is going to be huge for Murray. He's going to have two solid wide receiver options to throw to, as well as his new tight end. Um, Even with Rondale Moore out, who have I've been kind of disappointed to see him not take that step up in the last couple
Mhm.
weeks. I think that the Cardinals are going to be throwing the ball a lot to their two big options.
Yeah, so I'm totally good with rolling Hollywood back out there if he is activated. And D Hop has been a wide receiver one that you drafted late. So anyone out there that drafted D Hop and stashed him after the draft, claps to you. Fantastic move. We got him at a steal. And then the running back situation, now that they cut, Benjamin, James Conner's pretty much a straight play. I think he's right back into the being solid running back too. That's something we don't have to really touch on too much. And I can move us on. If you want to cut me off, you can. We can move on to the Seattle Seahawks and the Las Vegas Raiders. This doesn't seem like a great matchup until you look at the fact that this is two teams with solid offensive options for fantasy, and both defenses are very bleh. this game could actually be high scoring. One of those games where it's like, should be a blowout, but the Raiders can kind of just hang in there. So this is almost a if you got them, you start them kind of situation.
Yeah, no, if there's anybody out there that you have on the Raiders or Seahawks, this is the matchup to do it. I know we were just looking at Seahawks. I was looking up for maybe Foster Moreau. They have the 31st ranked defense against tight ends. That also kind of correlates with their wide receivers as well. Um, I could honestly see this being a game that we're watching on Red Zone around that 4 o'clock hour, now going towards Sunday Night Football. And it's the game that's still going on just because there's so much back and forth action throughout. Um, or at least I'm hoping so. But
Mhm.
I think this one could be if you have them, start them, and I think they actually can do pretty well.
Yeah, so I'll just give a quick rundown. At least I'll start with the Seahawks side. Geno Smith's a good go. Kenneth Walker's good. DK and Lockett. Um, I mean, if you are desperate for a tight end, I'm still not, really suggesting either of the Seahawks tight ends. But you could do worse. Potentially, there's a chance a touchdown goes to one of them too in this matchup. So why not try? I don't know. And then the Raiders side, Josh Jacobs, who has still been a running back one, Devontae Adams, and like you said, Foster Moreau is, I think, a better dartboard player than the two Seahawks tight ends. He's somebody that I'd even potentially roll out there as maybe like the eighth or ninth best tight end because of the matchup this week. So.
I just took a look, or I just looked. We are at 47 and a half as a total right now. And
Anytime you're
that's actually
creeping towards 50, that's pretty good.
and that's what I'm hoping for. And that's usually a good indication of fantasy matchups then, because that means that there's a lot more fantasy people that are hopefully scoring. So I do like this matchup. I know it's not the most exciting or flashy on paper, but we still have to do respect that the Seahawks are a top contender for their division right now, in a division that we did not think their name would even be remotely close to. So it's good to see.
Yeah, 100%. And the one team we thought that was going to be the team at the top is the Los Angeles Rams, who are now a insane underdog to the Kansas City Chiefs. So, I mean, go ahead, Kempy. Just lead us off with that part because this is the one that's blowing my mind.
So I texted you and Snyder on, I believe it was Tuesday. Might have been Tuesday or Wednesday. And I was like, can you guess the spread for the Rams and Chiefs game on Sunday? And Snyder was pretty close. I think you might have said like 6.5 for
I think I said
plus six and a
eight
half,
or eight and a
plus eight
half
and
or
a half
something
for the
like that.
Rams. Some of the cover touchdown. I think Snyder
Yeah.
said plus 13 and a half, which covers two touchdowns. No, we're at plus 15 and a half at the time of our recording right now, which is insane to think about, especially because of how great the matchups have been between the Rams and the Chiefs, and always going back to that game a couple years ago in Mexico, and it was probably one of the best offensive games to watch as a fan. And now thinking that we could see a pretty much a murder out there if they're projecting it to be plus 15 and a half is insane to look at. I don't really love touching lines when they get that big, just because they're so like it's crazy. But if I do, I will take the underdog at plus 15 and a half. And I'll also kind of look at the under in a lot of these games. When the spread is that big, a lot of times they're projecting a blowout. And the Chiefs might not blow a lot of people out if that's the case. So George, leaving it that we might not think it might be a blow, or it might be a blowout, and there might not be a lot of points. Let's talk about who we might be playing on the Chiefs side if they're scoring well.
All right, so I'll lead it off with the injuries because we have to kind of see who's going to play. Kadarius Toney is out with his injury. I kind of hate to see it after he had the one big week and then the disappointing week with the injury, missing most of the game. Juju Smith-Schuster will be back though, but I don't necessarily like a lot of the pass catchers on that offense besides Travis Kelce because Travis Kelce is going to get his every single day of the week and the eighth day of the week that doesn't exist. But CEH on IR, chance that this game is going to be an absolute blowout. This is the other one that I was alluding to earlier. The I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. Isaiah Pacheco. I would not be shocked if he gets 25 carries. Even if he's averaging 4 yards a carry, he could get a touchdown or two. He could just basically run this entire clock out. Like, Isaiah Pacheco is my guy this week.
No, I completely agree with that. And Pacheco having that opportunity to be the running back in a game that might be a blowout, I don't see the Chiefs throwing too many times after their initial, first couple touchdowns. Let's say they go to Kelce the first time, Kelce the second time, Kelce the third time, Kelce the fourth, whatever. But let's just say they score a lot of touchdowns early, like they have been, and it might be to Travis Kelce, might be to Juju now that he's back. But after that, I don't see them throwing the ball. They're not going to be going downfield too often. They're just going to be handing off, get the clock going. We're beating the Rams at this point by 21 to 28 points. Let's just keep it going. Let's just make sure we're, you know, Andy Reid is a respectful head coach. I don't see him, you know,
Mhm.
blowing it out. So I think we're going to see a lot of Pacheco getting those carries just to kind of chop away at the clock. But while he's chopping away, like you mentioned, those 4 yard pickups are going to be massive moving forward. So those are all good fantasy points.
Exactly. As long as he's getting a big volume, we don't care about those 3, 4 yard carries. They're going to start adding up.
Garbage
And the
time,
big reason, oh,
garbage
God.
time fantasy points are still fantasy points. Don't you forget it.
Oh, 100%. You don't have to tell Tyler that. I know that. There's been a couple of games where I beat him in garbage time on a Sunday night game. He's like, of course you freaking did. George Luck. I don't know. But no, yeah, exactly. That's why there's so many announcers at the end of games. They'll be like, I know this doesn't mean anything to anybody, but fantasy owners are still clocking in because we got to see Isaiah Pacheco run this clock out for the last 2 minutes and get another 30 yards onto his total. But the reason I really think that this is going to be a blowout is not only are the Rams sputtering, but now Matt Stafford's out this week with his recurring concussion. Allen Robinson and Tyler Higbee are both questionable. So they're down to quarterback 2. They're down to wide receiver 3 and 4. They're down to tight end 2. Their running backs are probably most teams' running backs 4, 5, and 6 at this point. Like, there's absolutely no firepower left on that Rams offense, and they could surprise us and still put up 21. But I would honestly not be shocked if they put up 21 and the Chiefs put up 45. Like, that's the problem.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that you don't have to play any Rams. I think Higbee, if he goes, is probably your best option because he could end up being a target monster. I know that's what I'm kind of hoping for in our league of record, as I'm missing Zach Ertz in the tight end market's a joke. But I think that's basically your only option. And that can move us off of this to the team that is now second in that division, the San Francisco 49ers, are hosting the New Orleans Saints. My bad. And the big talk of the week for the 49ers has been Deebo Samuel, who is questionable but should play with a hamstring injury. Now, if you remember back to the week that Deebo missed before the bye, it was a hamstring injury. So a lot of people are immediately going to freak out, think about maybe even Keenan Allen in his situation where he came back, got hurt again with the hamstring problem. But this does not seem to be a total re-aggravation of that injury. This seems to be because they are coming off of a short week. They played on Monday. He was totally fine in that game, finished it, but they're managing his reps to make sure that nothing does flare up. He should be good to go and not have a problem.
No, I think it'll be a huge uptick. I mean, right now the San Francisco 49ers have a dangerous offense. So having
Mm-hmm.
Debo there is just a luxury at this point. And I think he was at one point the entire offense. Now I see him more as just another guy, but he's still a great guy to be starting out on a weekly basis.
Just because he's a touchdown waiting to happen, like his 20 something yard rushing touchdown last week. So
Hmm.
many guys to carry the ball, so many guys to throw the ball, and it's like, here's this gadget wide receiver to get yourself a rushing touchdown because this is how the 49ers attack you from every single angle and angles you never even thought of.
Oh, and I honestly think, and this sounds a little bit wrong, but I think Trey Lance's injury was a beautiful, beautiful gift to the San Francisco 49ers because I don't see them making the trade for CMC if they have the mobile quarterback that they would in Trey Lance. Instead, you have that system of Jimmy Garoppolo, who's just a great plug-in quarterback for the system they have. I think that having Garoppolo, I know people have said it increased their Super Bowl odds, but it has been a godsend to fantasy owners for Kittle, for Debo, and now for CMC that he's out there rather than Trey Lance.
Oh, 100% Garoppolo is the perfect quarterback for this system because you have so many guys around. Like, when you have someone like a Trey Lance, he's more of a hero ball kind of guy. He's what you think of as like a Josh Allen, is like, I'm going to go out there and do it myself, and I can still get the balls out to my playmakers, but when it's not enough, I got it. Garoppolo's not going to be that guy, but he has enough playmakers that he's able to pinpoint what the best read is. He's able to just make sure he's throwing these screens out there to these guys on the run and blah, blah, blah. Like, doing the little things. And then there's these 5 weapons around him with the Kittle, Debo, Ayuk, CMC, Eli Mitchell that can all take the ball to the house on any given play, that he's just setting them up for success. he's the most boring yet perfect for his team quarterback at this point. That's
And
exactly where I'm standing on it.
and perfect for if you have any of those San Francisco 49ers offensive pieces in fantasy.
Mhm.
You are so excited to have Jimmy Garoppolo there for that system, to support that system for your guys on your fantasy team to score those points.
100%. With that being said, I like Garoppolo as a play this week against the Saints as well as pretty much all those guys. I hope you don't have to play Eli Mitchell, but I think you could also do worse if you are in a disparate situation and need to play him as a flex. Moving to the Saints side of the ball, the running backs, both Kamara and Ingram, are questionable. Kamara shouldn't have a problem. He was just on there with an illness. Ingram is coming off of, I believe, 3 weeks missed with a knee injury. He should also be back, but I don't think he's anyone you're going to play in fantasy, so I'm not going to linger on that one. Kempy and I kind of narrowed this down to two guys. It's Kamara and it's Chris Olave, who has been one of the more surprising borderline wide receiver ones in the league this year.
It is amazing seeing. I usually look at our league of record and the person who owns Chris Olave at this point. I often just look at his team for trades, and just seeing how many projected points Olave is every single week is phenomenal to see. I mean, just a few weeks ago, I think he was around an 8-9 projection, that wide receiver 2 on your team that you might play. And then ever since then, it's been adding projected points. His projections are getting insane. I think he's up to this week around 13 and a half, which is wide receiver 1 on almost any fantasy team at this point. So it is phenomenal to see that he is progressing quite well, and it's exciting for the Saints. But that being said, it's Kamara, it's Olave, and of course Taysom Hill. No, but Kamara and Olave.
You could argue Juwan Johnson for the dartboard too, just because all
You,
he does is score touchdowns. But
you could.
no, you're right. Olave projected 13.45 and a half PPR on NFL.com, and his average points per game is hovering right around there as well. So I'm not worried about the matchup. You're rolling him out there because he's been so good to you, and you're hoping he's just going to do it again and again. I think that wraps up that. We can move on to Sunday Night Football, Green Bay Packers and Philadelphia Eagles. I know you had some good insight about the Eagles post Dallas Goedert. I shouldn't even say post. He's going to be back at some point. But hit me with that before we move on to the Packers side.
So post Dallas Goddard at this point for the Philadelphia Eagles, I think obviously has a boost to AJ Brown. Does AJ Brown need a boost? No, he's still going to be the wide receiver 1 for the Eagles at all times. However, the person seeing that big jump is, I think, going to be Devonta Smith. I think Devonta Smith takes that big jump to that wide receiver 2 level and fringe wide receiver 1 in some games, even with AJ Brown out there. I think the receptions have to go somewhere. Obviously, Quez Watkins is a guy that could be on a target for wide receiver 3 on the team. But I think the biggest help in this case scenario, the person who takes the biggest boost is Smith, good old Smitty.
Now I agree with you, and I was actually having this argument. I shouldn't even say it was an argument; it was a discussion at my Thanksgiving dinner this year about how the Eagles are going to, make up for those targets that we're losing with Dallas Goedert and AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Obviously, easy options, but I have a feeling that the running backs are going to start getting more involved in the passing game as well, because when you're looking for that short yardage kind of target, maybe the screen game is going to get more involved. Maybe you're going to see some of those angle routes out of the backfield that are going to be easy reads for the quarterback on a what happens to be a run pass option or whatever. So maybe Miles Sanders does get a couple of extra targets. Maybe there's going to see more Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott in there as well. But I want to just talk about specifically Miles Sanders for a second, because even if he's not involved more in the pass game, the Packers' run defense has actually been very bad. I know Cody's been kind of hitting the table on that for the last few weeks. So Miles Sanders, despite being disappointing the last few weeks, is a must play, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. It does scare me a little bit when you start bringing up that they're going to include running backs in the passing game, because sometimes that means that they have more of a rotation. Okay, this running back is going to be our pass back or passing running back. This one's going to be our, blocking for passing or blocking the rushers. And this one is going to be our running back. I do think, though, that Miles Sanders is still the guy that can fit all 3 of those molds. It does scare me, though, if they are throwing, they might throw a little more to Kenny Gainwell. But I still would start Miles Sanders very confidently Sunday night against Rodgers. And I do want to mention one more thing about this game before talking about the Packers. I just wanted to talk about the line of the over right now and the impacts that Jalen Hurts has on it, especially Eagles at home. So this might be looking into a little bit more, but the Eagles are 8-1 against the spread, or sorry, the over is 8-1 in Hurts' last 9 games at the link. So Jalen Hurts at home, 8-1, typically going to the over. And right now the over is set at 45.5, and they usually put up 51 points at home um, in the Jalen Hurts era. So it's definitely a line I'm looking at, especially with the Packers being pretty competitive as well. Do you want to talk about some of the Packers that we might be starting on the other side?
I want to touch Miles Sanders for 1/2 a second still because you're talking about a rotation. You got to remember there already is a rotation there. He's only averaging about 60% of the snaps per week. So I wouldn't worry about the rotation too much because there already is a rotation. But anyway, that'll get us off the Eagles side to the Packers side of the ball. We did learn since Tuesday that Aaron Rodgers' thumb injury has been a broken thumb, which is probably a really big indication onto why he's been struggling. And obviously, the further away you get from that injury, the better it's going to be. And he has started to look a little bit better. I mean, he did have the one dud against Tennessee last week, but coming off of a mini bye after showing a little bit of offensive success, never a bad thing to say. The Packers might be starting to get it together. Probably too late for the playoffs, but you never know. For fantasy, it's a good thing when you're looking at any of these Packers assets. So I am worried. I'm going to start with the running back because I'm a little worried about how the Eagles' stats against running backs, and now that they added Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, it can be skewed a little bit. After drive one last week against the Colts, once they started working in Sue and Joseph more, they gave up, I think it was 30 yards on the ground to the Colts and Jonathan Taylor the rest of the game. So Aaron Jones is still going to get his, but I think that tells me that I don't want to go the step further and play AJ Dillon as well.
I would agree. It is a little risky knowing that Aaron Jones is the guy. But sometimes you also have to think about if they can't run well with Aaron Jones, will they go to AJ Dillon? So I know it's rare that or isn't too rare, but it was difficult in drafts to get both Dillon and Aaron Jones because of how you know how high Dillon was ranked as a running back too on that team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say that I would definitely just be starting Jones. I think I'm waiting to see how Dillon performs.
I'm with you there. And then when it goes to their pass catchers, I mean, you never know if you have to throw out a Robert Tunyon because of a dartboard kind of deal, whatever. I don't even want to speculate into tight end dartboard candidates at this point because they're all a mess. Um,
And
but you
there's more of
said you're
them.
starting Rodgers.
There's
You
more
said
this
you're
week.
actually starting Rodgers when you're desperate here. But I think when it comes to the actual wide receivers, um, I knew I was going to have one point in this episode where I was going to completely blank on a name because I was doing it so much with you in the pre-show.
Oh yeah, we talked a lot.
Um,
We got Dobbs,
um,
we got Watson, we got
Watson is the guy I was thinking of there. So Christian Watson has been a touchdown machine the last few weeks, and I know that the Eagles defense is a tough task for any wide receiver, but I think Christian Watson's the guy I would roll out if I had to roll out anybody. And this is the week where I'm finally going to jump off of the Allen Lazard bandwagon and say not playing him in this matchup, even though he's been pretty consistent for the most part, except for maybe last week. Um, it's just Christian Watson.
from an Eagles fan's perspective, I'm almost gonna watch and see who Slay is covering for most of the game or early on. Is he on
Mm-hmm.
Lazard? Is he on Watson? And that might make an indication if I make like a live touchdown bet. If I see Slay is heavily covering Lazard, I might start making my way to Watson, making him maybe like an anytime touchdown better live. Just because he does have that speed capability. Obviously, he's shown in the last couple games that he is going to be able to score a touchdown. He is going to be able to be the secondary. So he's definitely somebody I'm watching for on Sunday night as well.
I like that insight there, and I think that can wrap up Eagles Packers. We can move on to our last game of the week, the exciting Monday Night Football matchup of the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Indianapolis Colts. So I just talked about the Colts a little bit from last week, and I can talk about a little bit more here. Steelers defense is a little bit better since it got TJ Watt back, but it's still not great. And that means on the Colts side of the ball, Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor could both feast this week.
Mhm. And I will admit, the last time I was on this show, I think we were talking about, I forget who it was at the Giants at this point, which shows you my point was kind of invalid. But I said that I would pick that person over Michael Pittman because I didn't like Pittman at that point. That was in the
I think
Ellinger
it was
era.
probably Wandale Robinson.
I think it actually was
We didn't
Wandale
mention him.
Robinson.
We
Um,
didn't mention, but he tore his ACL, and thoughts out to him. But
so that just clear it 100% shows that I was wrong what I thought of at the time. But that was also in the same Ellinger era. I think now that Matt Ryan is back under as a quarterback, that takes Pittman's floor to the next level. I think you can rely on him getting a certain amount of fantasy points every single week, and then if he gets a touchdown, it goes above that. I love Pittman moving forward, just because as long as him and Matt Ryan seem to have that connection that they built upon, uh, I think he could be a great wide receiver 2 on your team moving forward. But as the season progresses, and maybe we'll see how matchups go, he might even be your wide receiver 1, depending on what you need to play out every week.
This, unfortunately, is one of those teams that's going to do really well for you and then has a week 14 bye, so I hope you clinch your playoff matchup before that. But Pittsburgh gives up the most points to fantasy wide receivers. I think Michael Pittman's floor and a half PPR is probably about 9 points. You could probably bump that to 12 in a matchup like this. So great play. I agree with that. And I pretty much wraps up the Colts side of the ball. There's not really anyone else outside of those two that I really love. On the Steelers side of the ball, it's very interesting. So Jalen Warren was starting to eat into the carries of Najee Harris. He did not practice Friday, most likely is not going to go. This is the only game we don't have the final injury report on, because obviously that comes out on a Saturday for a Monday night game. But that pretty much makes Najee Harris a must play despite the rough matchup. And he has actually looked better since Tyler gave him the advice of just run forward. It looked like he listened. I would like to believe he did listen, but it was just kind of funny how you heard that one. And then Steelers pass catchers. You and I were talking a lot about the George Pickens versus Deontay Johnson. Where'd you come to in that argument?
I am a George Pickens person, and this is another one of those things where I talked about how you have to find those perfect categories. You have sports betting, you look at the lines there, you look at the fantasy analysis, and then you look at the sports fan. The sports fan of me watching Red Zone, or even watching any Steelers games that we get on local television, living in Pennsylvania, I loved seeing that connection that Pickett had to Pickens.
Either way, it's going to be hard to say. It doesn't matter because
pick. But didn't lead to a pick. It led to a connection between the two, where it seemed like Pickens was his favorite target or his preferred target, and Pickens was making talented plays. And while those targets might not have led to fantasy points initially, it's something that I look forward to as their connection progresses, and maybe even that connection could be in the season, and it could be in the fantasy playoffs if everything goes right.
I'm with you, and it's not saying that Deontay Johnson's going to be absolutely useless for your teams. I know there's a lot of people that are saying buy low on him because they don't think Pickens is going to continue. I almost said Pickett instead of Pickens. But I am also with you that I think Pickens is actually emerging as the wide receiver 1, and Deontay Johnson's still going to be involved. I just know that there's a ceiling when it comes to this Pittsburgh offense with the rookie quarterback, with them not just not performing up to the traditional Steelers offense that we're used to. So in a bad matchup, I'm okay with rolling out Pickens if you're desperate to. Hopefully you have your studs because there's no bye weeks that you can play instead. Like, I definitely like Pittman over Pickens. But he's someone that you can play, and Deontay Johnson, someone I'm keeping on the bench unless I'm desperate with injuries or whatever it might be.
Completely agree.
All right. I think that finishes up our matchups. Hopefully we didn't miss anything there. Kempy, thank you one more time for jumping on, especially at short notice. It means a lot, and thank you for all of your great insight, sports betting and fantasy-wise. I look forward to seeing you on the show again in a few weeks in the fantasy playoffs.
Hey, George, thank you so much. I'm hoping that I can come back on. I'm loving it. I hope I can come on sometime with Snyder and Cody as well. It's been a real treat. I appreciate you calling me in on the golf course. I will be the P Ryan this week. I'll be white maybe. When those guys are doubtful, I'll try and make my best to perform off the waiver wire.
Well, you're sitting on my bench. I'm not going to leave you on the waiver wire. You're too important of an asset. Let me just tell you that.
Appreciate it.
But thank you all one more time for listening into the Couch GMs podcast. As Snyder would like to say, this podcast is so much more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved. So make sure you're asking us those questions, letting us know what you liked about the show, what you didn't, letting us know how you like Kempy's betting information because it helped you win a couple of bucks on DraftKings this week. I mean, at least that's what I'm going to say. But
hopefully.
And whatever you guys want to hear, just let us know because we want to make this show for you, and it's much more fun for us and for you when you get involved. All right, for Tyler Kemp,